Redistricting. You hear the most outrageous lies. Apologies to the writers of the movie Repo Man, the gogglebox do-gooders that are out there trying to tell you where and what is really going on in Virginia redistricting are trying to get you to vote for it probably in middle April. They need to have this vote cast by the middle of April so that there is time, if they do succeed in convincing you to overturn an election that went down 65% in favor of a nonpartisan redistricting commission that each 10 years would redraw Virginia's districts based on population shifts, tear that up in favor of a reactionary bill that would allow them, if another state changed their districts, Virginia could invoke this constitutional amendment to recreate theirs. So that's what's going on here in Virginia. And just as a quick note, this is what it looks like nationwide. When you look at the states that are discussing whether or not to redistrict, you're looking at certainly Texas, the beginning of all of this. But a reminder about Texas, this was court-ordered redistricting because it had been determined that Texas's districts were drawn racially biased, and you're not allowed to do that. Then California said, well, if they're going to redistrict, then we're going to redistrict. And you can see on the map how few Republican places there are in California, and they're trying to make that even fewer. Then you have Illinois, J.B. Pritzker there, Florida, Louisiana, Nebraska and Kansas, Utah got into it, North Carolina, and even New York State is talking about redistricting their congressional districts ahead of the midterms. Now, unlike all those other states, Virginia had a constitutional amendment that said you can't do it. Actually, I believe New York has a constitutional amendment, but their process for changing a constitutional amendment is much less stringent. Now, what's happened in Virginia is that they've pulled some rabbits out of the hat. In Virginia, the law says that in order to amend the Virginia Constitution, you have to pass the amendment through both the House and Senate. Governor's not involved in it. Then that has to sit for at minimum 2 years for at least one of the houses to all pass through an election cycle. That would have been last November for the House. However, then it has to pass another General Assembly session and then be brought to the voters. What happened was, because there was a special session invoked by Governor Youngkin to amend the Virginia budget, Speaker Don Scott used the parliamentary procedure to convene another meeting of that same special session in December to pass the constitutional amendment for a second time, just days before the culmination of Virginia's 2025 election cycle. The debate is, and there are court proceedings that are going to proceed, both on whether or not the ensuing vote for the constitutional amendment can take place and whether or not 45 days of election is the election, or if it is only on Election Day. The argument being, on one side, that 45 days, which is how long Virginians have to vote absentee, in person, or by mail, constitutes the totality of the election, or if, since the ballots, according to those on the left, aren't tabulated until Election Day, that all those days prior to Election Day are just early opportunities to place your ballot in the hands of someone who isn't going to count it until Election Day. That's the debate that is going to be brought into some Virginia courts over the next few weeks, as well as the question as to whether it is legal to force a clerk of your county or my county to have a special election in April if they haven't had the sufficient time in advance to post the constitutional amendment for you to read it. I know start to get a little glassy-eyed when you talk about all these lawyers and all these laws, but these are the ways that Virginia's Constitution is supposed to protect you from rapid and ramrodded legislations. So let's look at what they're proposing to do. This is Virginia's congressional district map of right now. Right now, I think we are seven Democrat represented districts and 4 Republican represented districts, and you can see where they are, the 6th and the 1st and down through the 2nd and the 3rd. So what do they want it to wind up looking like? This is one of the proposed bills. Now, the folks in Louise Lucas's party will tell you there are no final, even though she has tweeted out some of these pictures under the hashtag 10-1, because that's what they want. They want to create 10 reliably blue congressional districts and only one here in Southside as a Republican majority district. So how do they determine that? Well, this is a graph that we've taken from the Virginia Public Access Project, and this shows you how Virginia's congressional districts voted. How do you get to where 10 districts would be Democrat majority? First, you take the red districts and you drag them towards where they become more blue. That would be congressional districts 9 and 6 and 5. And then you take these blue districts that, if you can look at the distance, they are 40% plus Democrat. Congressional District 8, Congressional District 13, and 3 and 4 are all 20% or more Democrat support. You take those districts and you stretch them all the way out until they reach as far west as you can. Because if you look at where we are currently, you'll see that the blue districts here in the 10th and 11th and the 1st, they're all along what is called the Blue Crescent in Virginia, that going from the Washington, D.C. suburbs all the way down into Hampton Roads. So what they want to do then is take that and turn it into this by stretching all of those districts that are 20% or more Democrat into the areas that are Republican. Now, the hard part about this is that when you talk about this, it would be easy in a state like New York, where citizens register to vote under a particular political party. In Virginia, we're very proud of the fact that we do not register by party. So how do you know? How do they know these numbers? How does the VPAP people, how do they figure this? If we don't register by party, how do you know that Congressional District 11 is 25% Democrat majority? How do you know that? Well, it's simply by election results. What they do is they take historical election results and tabulate them together, and then they come up with an average. The thing is, on average, Virginia's elections see somewhere between 53 and 57% voter turnout. So what they're going to do with these districts is they're going to take these 20 and 40% Democrat districts by election results, stretch them to the point of breaking, stretch them to the point where they're going to be right at the edge of being maybe 52%, maybe 53% Democrats by election results historically, and stop, not go any further. The peril in this, as I see it, is that you have now created an opportunity where a district, nobody would have ever said, hey, maybe we can win this district as a Republican. with a voter turnout game, now you're in the game. If you can bring out the 40% odd that don't turn out, some of them are Republicans. And that's the peril in this, is that by doing this, they're putting themselves in a position of taking all of those safe districts along the blue crescent from Northern Virginia down through Hampton Roads, the first and the third, and stretching them to the point of them being perilously close to a 50-50 split, just to be able to say, well, it's a 52% Democrat majority. But again, doing the arithmetic to it is that these are based on purely election results. And if, given this scenario, a motivated Republican voter base could easily turn this 10-1 scenario on its head. But that's how it's all going to roll out. And the questions, the legal questions, will first be borne out before April comes along, when this will come to a special election near you. Another quick point, historically, special elections have not seen very high voter turnout. So it'll be incumbent on both political parties to get their voters motivated to vote in a time when a lot of other things are going on in April. But they'll have to do it then in order to have this election completed in time for the redrawing of the districts so that they can have them in place by the time the famous midterm elections come along. I'm sure this is now just as clear as mud to you, but that's the plan. As it is passed before the General Assembly was 2 days old, the plan is now in place, and it will be coming to the voters whether or not there is a court case that is heard. Now that there is legislation, the Virginia Supreme Court will hear these cases, whether or not the clerks can be forced to conduct a special election for a constitutional amendment that they won't have the time to sufficiently post for the 90-day period before the special election. And if that isn't enough, the question as to whether the chicanery that went on around how to create a special session of the General Assembly in order to consider whether or not November of 2025 was the intervening election, which is what Virginia law mandates, is that there has to be an intervening election, or in the fact that the special session of the General Assembly happened 42 days into a 45-day voting cycle, whether that counted or not. So those are going to be two very big court rulings in this before we ever get to April. Hopefully that has made it make a little bit more sense to you. Please email your delegates and your state senators, and you can always send me an email as well here at the Daily Signal.